for coming to the first ever Rosie the Literacy Clown Storytime show. I'm Rosie the Literacy Clown. I'm here to tell you a story about a storyteller. Well, it's a story about a clown because it's our first show, so it should be a special story. So it's a story about a clown, but it begins with a storyteller, and the storyteller was very sad because he saw all the children were very sad because all the children were looking at their devices all the time. And the storyteller wanted to tell the children some stories, but they just kept looking at their devices and they were staring into the screens like zombies, and it was turning their brains into mush. And the storyteller was so sad that all the children's brains were becoming mushified. And he really had to figure out what he was going to do about it, but he couldn't figure out. He was just one guy, and it's such a big problem. So the storyteller thought about it for 100 days and 100 nights. And then on the 101st morning, he woke up from sleeping and he said, I know what I need. I need a clown. Not just any clown. I need a literacy clown. And so the storyteller sat down at his writing desk and he got out an envelope and a piece of paper and a pen. And he wrote a letter to the clown bakery. And he said, please send me one literacy clown. And the bakery got the letter and they said, well, we never made a literacy clown before, but I think we can do it. And so they sent him a letter back and they said, please wait 4 to 6 weeks and we will send it to your door. And the storyteller was like, oh, 4 to 6 weeks, that's a long time, but okay, whatever, I guess. And then the clown bakery, they said, what do we need to make a literacy clown? That we don't have it, we never done it. So they sent a letter to their local library. And they said, please send us all your children's books so we can make a literacy clown. And so the library read the letter and they said, well, that sounds like a good cause. So they put all their books into a pickup truck and then they drove the pickup truck over to the clown bakery and they said, here's the books. Now the clown bakery, they took all the books and they put it into a giant blender. And then they poured apple juice into the blender and they blended it all into a paste. And then to the paste they added 2 buckets of sugar, 2 gallons of milk, 3 buckets of flour, some baking powder and baking soda, and like 2 dozen eggs. And they mixed it all together in a big mixer, and then they poured it into a clown-shaped mold. The clown-shaped mold was placed into the oven at 400 degrees for 2 days. And after 2 days, they took it out of the oven and put it on a windowsill for another day to cool off because it was very hot. And then the clown-shaped mold became a clown because it was moving, and the clown got up out of the mold, and he said, hi, I'm Rosie the Literacy Clown. What are we doing? And they said, we gotta send you to a storyteller. So they put Rosie the Literacy Clown into a big crate, and they gave the crate to the mailman, and then the mailman brought the crate to the storyteller, and the storyteller said, oh, this is awesome, I'm so happy. And he opened up the crate, and out popped Rosie the Literacy Clown. And I said, what are we doing? And he said, well, the children are not reading their books, and we want the children to read their books, but all they do is look at their devices. And I said, okay, well, you put me into their devices by putting me into your device, and then I'll be in their device. And the storyteller said, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do that. But the storyteller didn't have any followers, and the children, they were all under the influence of influencers, and there wasn't enough hype to change the algorithm. So Rosie the Literacy Clown told the storyteller, we're gonna need another idea. And the storyteller said, I don't know what else to do. My idea was to get a clown. You're the clown. And so Rosie the Literacy Clown said, okay, well, I think I know what to do. We can go talk to the President of the United States of America. He said, great, go do that. And I said, okay. And so I sent a message to the clown car pool, and I said, can you come please pick me up so I could go talk to the President of the United States? And they wrote me back and they said, sure, we'll be there in a while. And then the clown carpool got there. And I got into the clown carpool and went to the President of the United States of America. I said, Mr. President, there's a big problem. The children aren't reading their books. And he said, oh yeah, that is a big problem. What are we going to do about it? And I said, we got to make America literate again. And he said, okay, how are we going to do that? And I said, well, you got to turn off the power so they can't look at their devices. And the president said, yeah, okay, I guess we can do that. So the President of the United States turned off all the power in the world, and then all the children were using their devices, but the devices, their batteries ran out. And then when there were no more batteries, there was no more electricity, and they couldn't use their devices, and they started losing their minds because they were mindless without their devices. And they were breaking everything in the kitchen, all the fine china and the glasses and the windows, and the parents were like, this is a terrible mess. We got to do something about this. And the parents put all the children into the basement. And so now all the children are in the basement, but they were still losing their minds. They're just breaking things down in the basement. And the president said, well, this is a disaster. What are we going to do? I said, Mr. President, they're down there with nothing to do. You got to give them books. And the president said, okay, but how are you going to, we can't call them on the phone. There's no electricity. I said, we're going to write a letter. I got like 30 clowns in the clown carpool who drove here with me. So me and all the clowns from the clown carpool, we did a letter writing campaign, and we told all the parents, listen, you got to give the children books. But then the parents wrote us back, and the parents said, what are books? And so then we had to write letters back and explain what books are. And then the parents were like, oh yeah, you mean like from school? And I was like, and then we wrote better, like, yes, from school. Give the children books in the basement. They need books. So then the parents gave the children books. And the children, they had learned how to read in school, but they didn't know why, but they didn't know how. And so then they got the books, and they were reading the books, and they stopped breaking everything in the basement, and they became very quiet. And then eventually they didn't even want to get out of the basement. The parents unlocked the door to the basement, but then the children just stayed down there reading the books. They were having a great time. And then the parents were like, they wrote us back at the White House, and they said, well, they won't come out of the basement. And we wrote them back and said, well, you got to get them out of the basement. And so then the parents went down to the basement, and they got the children out of the basement, but the children just kept reading books. They were having such a great time. And it was the most wonderful thing Rosie the literacy clown had ever seen in his very short life, to have all the children reading their books again. He was so happy, and the storyteller was so happy, and they danced around and they were so happy. And the children had learned that a book is better than a device, because a book is your imagination. Imagination is like 1,000 devices in one device. And then 1,000 of those devices in another device. And so Rosie the literacy clown was so happy, but then what happened was he woke up and he realized he was dreaming. It had all been a dream. He was backstage at the circus, and it was his day off, so he wasn't in the circus. So he went and he watched the circus, and he saw all the children were still on their devices. And none of them were watching the circus. They didn't care about the ringleader or the clown or the lion or the trapeze. They just were watching their influencers. They were under the influence of influencers, staring at their devices. So Rosie the literacy clown, he got very sad, and he started to cry. And he cried and cried and cried and cried. And then the children, they noticed that he was crying, and they put down their devices, and they were all pointing and laughing at him. And Rosie the literacy clown was so sad. But then what happened was he woke up again, and he realized that he was dreaming. Maybe still, was that it? There was one dream was inside of another dream, and then there was another dream, and he couldn't keep track of all the dreams inside of the dreams. And he thinks maybe he's still dreaming, but maybe not. But maybe being awake is just a dream that we dream together. But the important thing was that we need to read books because we need to have a strong, healthy imagination. Because it's by using your imagination that you can understand how very strange the world is. And it's because the grown-ups don't have a good imagination that the world just gets stranger and stranger and stranger. And maybe the children can read the books and then show the grown-ups how to use their imagination so that maybe the world will become a little less strange. Alright, well, thanks for coming to the Rosie the Literacy Clown Storytime Show. I was so glad you're here. I can't wait until next time. I'm so excited. You're all my best friends. Bye.